Welcome to Hobby Palooza 2025. Hello everyone, I'm Orlando from A Collector's Dream, and I'm honored this year to be your Hobby Palooza ambassador. This year, we're once again proud to support Signatures for Soldiers, a non-profit helping disabled veterans through the power of sports autographs. As you know, we're accepting donations all weekend long, and for every $10 that you donate, you'll earn one raffle entry for some amazing prizes. The preferred way to donate is through Zelle in your banking app to the email jekoffma@yahoo.com, jekoffma@yahoo.com. The Zelle is not an option. Use PayPal, goods and services to the same email. Let's go ahead and beat last year's total of over $5,800. This hour of Hobby Palooza is brought to you by the Penny Sleever, who are generously donating 10% of this week's sales at thepennysleever.com to Signatures for Soldiers. The Penny Sleever, as you know, has top quality supplies at fair prices. Enjoy the show and have some fun. Hey guys, it's me, Orlando from Collector's Dream. I just want to thank Four Collectors for allowing me to be the ambassador of Hobby Palooza this year. I'm very honored for that, and just thanks so very much for that, guys. And with me today, I got Ryan Nolan, breakout cards, and Ryan and I are gonna spend whole hour talking about 19th century cards, which is something that hasn't been seen so far in Hobby Palooza. And I think it's something that's going to be very interesting and a lot of fun for everybody. Before we start off real quick, I want to thank one of my friends, Daniel Pope, who texted me and said that he has donated $1,000 to the Signature for Soldiers. And there he is, Classy Sports Cards. Thank you, Daniel. $1,000 is a huge donation. So I just want to thank you for that. So, Ryan, what do you think? I wanted to ask you, Ryan, how did you get into collecting 19th century cards? You're such a young guy, you know.
I know it's a question I get all the time. It's interesting because I was lucky enough exposed to 50s through 70s baseball cards at an early age because my dad told me to get into vintage cards, and then when I used to travel almost every single weekend, which I'll never do again, all around all these card shows, one of the things that I just started doing is going backwards, you know, because I like the 50s and 60s, but I wasn't really exposed to that until I started traveling all the time. And I saw like all the vintage stuff was in the showcases, but I typically didn't see anything, you know, like T206s that often, or even stuff in the 1800s. And it kind of piqued my interest because I always assumed that, you know, vintage was rare, but as soon as you get back into the 1800s, you found that's the truly rare stuff, not the stuff from the 50s and 70s. Even at that time, I wasn't really super well aware of the non-sport side of the 1800s, but figuring on the baseball side, like you'll judge cards or some Allen Ginters or Goodwin Champs. And yeah, kind of just kept working backwards, which I noticed a lot of people do. Start from modern, then start progressing to the 90s inserts, 80s stuff. And then they jump into that 50s through 70s era, which there's nothing wrong with that era at all. But I find like you can always find most of those cards except for some of like the food and beverage and regional issues. So I kind of gravitate towards the stuff where you can't really find it. It takes a challenge. How about you?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, you know, as a dealer in the 80s, you know, I kind of got tired of looking at all the same cards. You know, you go to the card show and you see all the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and you know, I literally almost built every single set from that era. And it got to a point for me that I just kind of got bored with the hobby. So I went back to pre-war. And as I went back to pre-war, I just went even further back to pre-war, you know. And I call it the founders era, because it's kind of where, you know, you find all the people that started the sports, you know, back in those days. And, you know, once I got into the sports end of it, you kind of get into the non-sports also. So that's kind of what got me into it, just the rarity of those pieces, stuff that you just never see. And, you know, I really got into reading about how these cards were printed. And, you know, we talk a lot about the old Judge and all those, which are literally pictures, you know, like this, you know, this is the John L. Sullivan from the 1880s. And most of the old Judge cards are like that. But as I studied a little bit more about them, I was actually in the printing business for most of my life. about 35 years. That's what I worked in. And I started reading up about, some of these cards. And, these cards were made by a process called chromolithography. And it's what we call today chrome cards. It's the same printing process, except it was done by hand back in those days. And, one show somebody came up to my table and sold me like a handful of Goodwin Champion cards. And once I saw those, I just fell in love with them. To me, they were the nicest cards I've ever seen. And the more I looked into it, the more I studied it, the more I realized that, these are literally works of art.
No,
So that's kind of what got me into it. Yeah.
No, they really are. I mean, they really stand out in comparison to everything else on that side of things. And one of the things I was going to say, what I love about the Goodwin Champs as well as Allen and Ginter, is it kind of exposes people to other branches of collecting. Now, everyone thinks of these as predominantly baseball card sets, rightfully so. But you take a look at the Goodwin Champ set, which we'll talk about a lot more later. You have non-sports icons in that set. Like you have Colonel Cody in there, which a lot of non-sports collectors that love like Western themed characters, Colonel Cody's kind of on their Mount Rushmore of that side of things. You go into the Allen Ginter set, of course, Cody's in there again, but then you also have Ann Oakley, famous female, at least on that side of things too. So you have two different collector pieces that want to get her cards. And then what's also really cool is you get the alternative sports outside of the big four, right? Both sets feature a lot of tennis players in there. There's also quite a few boxers in there. You have people that were pedestrians. And, for anyone that doesn't know pedestrians, this is like an early form of ultra running where someone would either run/walk very long distances, whether 24 hours or even 7 to 10 days, which is really incredible. Now, I think some of those distances were fabricated because even some of the pros today would struggle at that. But regardless, it went really, really far. And I think it's a great way to get people into other forms of collecting, even outside of baseball and the vintage side of things, because vintage baseball collecting is great. But I think really people haven't explored all these other alternative routes as of yet.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we want to talk about. So we're not really going to show baseball cards today. We're going to show non-sports cards. We're going to show cards of some of the greatest, American legends, And one of the things that I wanted to share, one of the sets we're going to talk about is the Great American set. And talking about the printing process, this is a proof sheet from the Great American set. And this is how these cards were printed. They were literally printed on, today they use aluminum as the means of putting the design, but they used to put them on limestone blocks. And the limestone blocks, they literally would sand them down and carve into them. And you could see, of course, in the printing process, there's only 4 colors. There's the black, yellow, blue, and magenta, which is red. So what they did was, this is an actual sheet, a proof sheet, and you could see how they would match the colors. These are the colors down here that they would have to match to the actual cards, and where they would print them and how they would literally, proof them. Of course, this has some damage because they would do it by hand and it would be one color on top of the other until they got the color matches just right at the bottom here where it was supposed to be. And the cards, they came out like this with, the logo on the bottom. And that's the only thing missing from here because the logo is just put on there. So this is an actual sheet that they would print from those limestone blocks where they put one color on top and then this is how they match the colors. So it's super interesting and it's truly a work of art. I mean, these things were handmade. This is before they had, literal printing presses, So someone would literally have to do it by hand and match all of that to make sure that these were perfect before they did it, and they'd hand cut them. So that's why some of them were usually they were off-centered or miscut. Here's one here. You can see that's miscut. But that's how they would come from the press. And all of these cards in the 19th century, they're Jefferson Bird designated as N cards. So N is just 19th century. And that's kind of, the printing process of those. And, I mean, literally just made by hand. The proof is very thin. It's literally just a piece of paper that was placed on there. So it's very, very thin. Now the cards are rather
Super
thick,
thick.
but the proof sheet is just a piece of paper. I don't want to take the back of it out, but it's literally a piece of paper. And this part here, where you see that the paper came off, you could see through it, But on the bottom, it shows how they literally just had to match those colors with the colors that were on there. And once the proofreader or the person that would confirm that's the right thing, then they take it to press, and they would put it on that limestone block and put one color, then put the other color, and then the other color until they got them exactly right on the sheet. And it's a kind of like, just like a cardboard.
And what I will say as well is there's technically two sets with the Great Americans. So we saw the single cards as well. Another one that they had were these triples. So they would have three iconic figures on one together. Now, if you look at the names on this one, right? Washington, Hamilton, and Hancock. This is one of the best triples in the set. Some of these are quite loaded. Now, not everyone has a triple because there's 50 cards in the set, right? 50 divided by 3 doesn't work. And just to show you the back over here, on this list them out on this side of things, completely different back than the normals. And I'll put one of the normal backs over here just to show you guys. So that's a normal back. That is the triple. The triple has a designation of N112 on that side of things. And the triples are significantly rare. You'll only see a few of these that sell every single year on the triples. And there's a lot of people that really compete over those on that side of things. So there is that one. Another one that I have in my personal collection, which I should have grabbed, is the Edison Franklin Morse. Another one of those, which I would consider kind of towards the top, just based off of the power that is on that card. No pun intended. But yeah, it's a quite amazing set. Another thing that we briefly talked about a little bit in the beginning is the scarcity of these cards. So I'm going to load up a pop report right now. The chat can make some guesses. How many do you think of like single cards of like the N112s or the N76 exist out there? Because these are, I wouldn't say super rare, but like they're kind of rare on this side of things. And there's a lot of stuff in non-sports that are way tougher to find, but just the artwork on these are really magnificent. And I'll show some of these other ones, but I'll load up some of the pop reports now.
Yeah, put Ryan on so he can show some of the cards also in the pop report.
Yeah, let me load up the pop report really quick on here. I'll just read it off some of these, and I'll put N112 as well. And I'm just grabbing the PSA pop. There's a lot also at SGC too, so I just think it's easier just to load that up. Okay, so on this side of things for the N76s, so let's grab a bigger name in that set. And we'll also talk about some of the big names in the set because a lot of these people are household names. So just grabbing someone, Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens. At PSA right now, there is a total of 27 graded. Right? Compare that to some of these other sets. Thomas Edison, you have 29 graded on that side of things. Benjamin Franklin, right? You have 32. Now, I'd assume there's at least 10 to 15 at SGC for each of these. But there's not a lot, right? You're under 50 for each of those cards. Additionally, there's not a lot of high grades. The majority of these that you're going to find are going to be anywhere from that 2 to 5 range. Occasionally, you'll find a 6 or a 7 out there. They do fetch quite a lot. Let me show you what a 6 looks like, because I actually have a Mark Twain 6 in my personal collection. I have it in one of these stacks. And then I'll also talk about the N112s. Oh, it's right here on the top of the other stack. So this is an example of a 6. Now, I got lucky. I bought this at a really nice time before these have gotten crazy in price.
But look at the artwork on those. You see how it has Mark Twain, and then on top, it has an entire scene.
And the camera doesn't do it justice. Like if you saw these in person, it's they're way, way nicer. And you can see the back on this side as well. And Yeah, so there's that there. I'm loading up the N112 right now. Let me
Yeah,
just grab
you
that.
see how beautiful the scenery is on those.
And also
This is
some of these others.
just imagine these things were handmade. And back in these days when these things were done, many people remember there's no TV or anything back then, or even color, because a lot of these, the the newspapers would show these guys. This is Daniel Webster, and these were people didn't even know what these guys actually looked like. With no TV or anything like that, it was something that these cards were real collectible back in the day. Because these were very famous Americans, people that have you know big history. George Washington, Ben Franklin. You know,
So here's the Washington. I have the N112 as well. So Washington is one of those, in my opinion, that just really pops. And you can see how bright this is on here. And such a unique card on that side of things. But with the N112 pop, right? Again, I'm just using PSA. I'm not set of the N12, which again, these are the triples, right? You have a total pop on here of 6, 50, 60 in total. Most of these are going to be anywhere from 3 to 5 graded in total. Like they are very scarce. So if you think tracking down an N76 is scarce, the N12s are another challenge in themselves. I think I've maybe seen like 1 or 2 at card shows. That's probably about it. And I think it was Alex that had those. Alex is a non-sports dealer that is actually going to be set up at the National this year. The brand that built out the N76 is called Duke. Now, a lot of people don't know about Duke because they didn't really make baseball cards. There's a few non-sports cards that feature baseball subjects by Duke, but Duke was a prominent manufacturer back then. Another one of their sets that's very similar to the N76s is this right over here, right? And these are going to be the N79s. And what's interesting about the N79s, the artwork on these are phenomenal, by the way. And you can see like this is a Vanderbilt over here. And take a look at the back. You have a train, you have stacks of money. Again, a lot of people are in both N76 and N79, but you also have some of the boxers in here. This set is called The History of Poor Boys. So people that grew up poor and then became very rich. So you actually have John Sullivan and Jake Kilrain, who are very famous for one of their fights, one of the most famous boxing fights of all time in that set. But then you have like Thomas Edison in there. You have Mark Twain in there. And that's one of the things why I like the N76s because of the household names. I'm going to read off these right now, right? So just going in alphabetical order of names that are really big that people know. John Adams, Samuel Clemens, Thomas Edison, Benjamin Franklin, Robert Fulton, James Garfield, Ulysses Grant, Alexander Hamilton, John Hancock, Patrick Henry, Andrew Jackson, Thomas Jefferson, Francis Scott Key, Abraham Lincoln, Henry Longfellow, Samuel Morse, John Payne, William Penn, Edgar Allan Poe, Winfield Scott, Sheridan, George Washington, Daniel and Noah Webster. So like think about how many big names out of that set of 50 that I just named right there. And there's other minor names and stuff like that some people would say, hey, these are bigger names and stuff like that. But I'm not reading off all 50 names. Like it's a loaded set.
It's American history, and we don't talk much about it in our small hobby. But when you really go back and look at the history of America, these cards are the history of America, and that's why we're not going to talk about baseball, because everybody knows the old judges, everybody knows the Mayos, everybody knows all the other cards like that. But these really are, the history of the United States. And Ryan talked about the Dukes being one of the big card companies back then. The big three was Duke, Allen and Ginter, and Goodwin. And Goodwin Champions, or Goodwin, Mr. Goodwin, he owned the Old Judge and Gypsy Queen. So when you see the Old Judge cards, that was Goodwin who started those, and those were from 1886 to 1890. And then Gypsy Queen also is another brand which had a lot of baseball players. And Allen and Ginter did a little bit of multi-sport, And Duke was, of course, non-sports for the most part. And some of the Allen and Ginter things, I wanted to show some of the albums that Allen and Ginter had. And this is the Birds. So you had actual cards that came out, and the artwork on these are just beautiful. You really got to see them in person. It's real tough to see. And I mean, it's like history. You know, these things are just beautiful. The cards themselves are beautiful, but you can actually order the album. And look at this. These cards were printed literally, 20, 30 years after the Civil War. So you can see the slave there cooking up the duck, So the artwork on these is just awesome. And you ordered these books from Allen and Ginter, from Goodwin. You can see the back, how it shows Allen and Ginter there. And this one here is from my 1889, The Game Birds of America. And then I also have this one here, which is called the Quadrupeds. And these are literally, lions and tigers and bears, and a little bit of everything. And what I love about these is you got to remember back in those days, people never, ever were able to see a zebra or a lion or any of these rare animals. The only way they could see them, a gorilla or chimpanzees, were from looking at these cards that would come in these tobacco packs, So it was just something incredible. And the artwork on these are things that, you just don't see in today. They were literally handmade, and they were, put together with this. I mean, this one's from 1890. And in the back, it's got the hunting dog and the Allen and Ginter logo. So, and the way that you got these albums was in the tobacco cards, you would get these coupons. And these came in the Old Judge. And these were, it said albums, and you could order those albums by saving up these little coupons. Should have taken the sleeve out of these, saving these little coupons up, and you would send them in. And these are also the same coupons that you would use to get the Old Judge cabinet cards. So in the back here, it says, pick the player that you want, and we'll send you one cabinet card of a baseball player, or the albums, and it will tell you which albums they had and how many coupons you'd have to save up to order to get these albums. So these coupons are kind of rare because most people use the coupons to get the albums. Let me show you one of the rarest albums out there. So those are a couple of the Allen and Ginter albums. And some of the rarer albums were the Goodwin Champions albums. And this is the Goodwin Champion album, which has the entire Goodwin Champion cards in it. I'll show you the back. And the lithography on these were just, the artwork is just incredible. I mean, this is all done by hand, and the binder was all done by hand. Most of these, you'll find the individual pages, but it's very, very difficult to find the entire album. And I'll share with you what some of the albums look on the inside. This is the one that has the baseball players page, and I'll go and show you some of the different pages in there. The rowing, I mean, you have to see them in person. This is the tennis. And not only does it have the tennis players, but it has the actual, how they played tennis, the actual lawn, how they set it up. So it has scenery also. This is the one with the Beecher, the first football card ever made, and some of the other guys. So this is one of the ones with the boxers. And this particular album was one of the albums that required the most coupons. I think you had to save up 50 coupons to get this album. So it's pretty rare. There's probably less than 10 of these albums that still are out there that are still intact, like this particular one.
And what I was going to say also with the albums, some of the albums, I'd say, I don't know, maybe 50, 60% of the albums actually have cards associated with them, but there was a lot of albums that they just never produced the cards for. Like obviously Goodwin Champs, you have that side of things. The Bird albums that we just took a look at, they are birds and animals, I should say. They both have sets by Allen Ginter, but there's some really interesting ones. Like there's an Inventor album, and unfortunately, Allen and Ginter did not produce the cards. But what I find interesting is sometimes there are other companies overseas that would reproduce the albums as cards, and they're really, really scarce. So like that Inventor album, there's a Thomas Edison in there, and I always wish it was a card. There's a German collector that actually sent me the card, a German company that produced coffee in the early 1900s, took that album and made individual cards for each of those. Again, like there are probably one or two out there, so you're not going to find them. But it's really a shame that Allen Ginter didn't make cards one for one for each of those albums. And then also what's kind of interesting is CGC actually grades the hand cut cards out of those albums. Now, I do not condone destroying the albums. I'd rather have the album than the hand cut card. Some people did cut out the cards over time for both Allen Ginter and also what we just talked about. But CGC will slab them, and some people do pay up for those cards. So just a little bit of interesting fact. If you ever see them that are blinked back or that look very thin, those are hand cut from the albums or original artwork, and someone got those slabbed over time. What I also wanted to do is kind of show some of these other Allen and Ginter sets, because they actually made quite a few ones that are kind of popular in the hobby. So first, this set over here is called the World Smokers, and some people may recognize this logo. Check it out. So they actually have old Planter, famous for the Allen Ginter logo. If you opened Allen Ginter baseball cards from the 2000s, right, they had the old Planter backs. I want to say they were numbered to 25, but you can actually get the actual old Planter on the side of things. And these have gotten pricey over time, but I really, really like this card for its artwork and stuff like that. A 1.5 because it has a little bit of paper loss here on the front. And they made them for a lot of different countries as well and characters. So highly recommend that you explore them. Another one that's really popular in that set is Sir Walter Raleigh, a famous figure on that side of things.
There's the old Planter in the back of the book.
Yeah, go back to Orlando so we can show.
Yeah.
So check it out.
Here's the old Planter.
So you can see that is the same image. So I really like that. And there's a few other cards that feature old Planter on the front on that side of things. In fact, if you jump into the country flags, which I want to show as well, I don't have this card, but Belgium has a really, really rare card where it's like a tobacco advertising front, and old Planters on there as well. What a lot of people like on there are the American flags. So I have the duo right over here. So you can see this is the most popular card in the set. It's not the most valuable, but it's the most popular, and it's so cool, the imagery on that. And this is the other US flag in that set too. But going back into what I mentioned, sometimes you would have the original Allen Ginter cards reprinted a little bit later. And we're actually going to talk about this if we have a little bit of time later on in this episode or whatever we want to call it, live stream. But T cards. So these were produced at essentially like 1899, 1900, around that time period. But you can see on this side of things, a T428 of the American flag as well. So this was reprinted later down the road, the same exact imagery on the front. Back, it's a little bit different. There's a few different variations of these backs. You can see over there, flags of all nations once again. But we'll talk about, what happened after all the tobacco companies decided to merge, right? Because people know about that era, like Allen Ginter, Goodwin Champs, and then you had no tobacco cards for the longest amount of time, minus the Mayos in the middle of the 1890s, but you didn't really have sets getting produced because there's no need to. The exception is some of these T400s, which were produced overseas, notably Australia or the United Kingdom, although there's a few other places that were distributed, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Also, one other Allen Ginter card I wanted to show really quick is while a lot of these had amazing images like this, right? You still have these sepia tone cards. So this is one of my favorites, also my collection. 1892 Statue of Liberty views of Bartholdi's Statue of Liberty. So you don't hear it as called Bartholdi's Statue of Liberty anymore, just Statue of Liberty, but Bartholdi built it, right? Or designed it, I should say, not technically built it. But this is a very rare card from Allen Ginter as well. This is a skinned version. Unfortunately, I don't have one with the back present. I believe it's just a blank back. But you can see Allen Ginter made quite a few different cards back then. What do you think? We should talk about some great Americans right now, Lone Jacks. Because they also,
Do you have any more great Americans you want to show? And then
I was going to show one
I'll
other.
show my good ones, and you can show your Lone Jacks.
Yeah, so I was going to show one other Duke card because I didn't actually show this one. So this was another example of a Duke set. Duke, again, they made tons of sets out there. This is a more affordable set if someone wants to jump into it. Like, let's say you have a favorite holiday, right? So this is Duke's Holidays over here. This is Washington, which I consider the poor man's Washington because this doesn't fetch the Duke N76 price. You can find these under $100 still, but it's still a Duke Washington, although he's a small part of the card. But you can find a bunch of different holidays, both in the United States as well as overseas. And some non-sports collectors will post, oh, it's Christmas or Thanksgiving or New Year's, and we'll just post the Duke's holiday on that day. So if you want to have a social media post once a year for a specific holiday, pick up one of these, and you can always say, here's the card of the day.
Yeah, it's just so cool to see, Americana. I mean, this is American history. And, if you're really into this type of stuff, I really suggest that you really, learn a little bit about them. They're hard to come by, but, they're really not as expensive as you would think. It's just a matter of trying to find the cards, I mean, if you're looking at, one of these versus a mantle, this is cheaper than the mantle card for the most part, but they're real tough to find. So I want to share my Goodwin Champions cards. And, I've talked about it before. I've got really the number one set.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Mookie brought up this question about grading. Yeah. Could you guys maybe answer that real quick? CGC grades some of these when SGC and PSA doesn't. Is there a reason? Is there a reason why?
Is he talking about skin cards or is he talking about non-sports in general? The problem with like non-sports in general is a lot of grading companies won't put in the additional research to grade them, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of research that get put into rare baseball cards, but the same isn't said for non-sports. I think that should change. But again, I don't run these grading companies. So unless you provide them a lot of documentation, they're not going to grade them. The biggest issue on that is once you go to overseas issues and stuff without backs, they're very hesitant on that side of things. I've gotten some stuff graded by both CGC as well as SGC. I haven't really tried the PSA route. I also do know the head grader at CGC loves foreign issues, so he's super invested into it, as well as a few other people that work at CGC. Like they're really big into overseas and like soccer cards and stuff like that. So they do a lot of research on there. I've had positive sides with them. I don't submit a ton to CGC. Occasionally I'll send stuff over there, but great team for researching.
Yeah, CGC is a little more lenient than PSA or SGC. And even some of the hand cut from the album cards, PSA and SGC won't grade those. I think CGC may grade some of those, but they're more lenient. So I want to show some of the what I feel, in my opinion, is the best looking set from the 19th century, and that's the Goodwin Champs. So this is the only baseball card I'm going to show, and of course, this is probably the most famous card of the set, and that's the Cap Anson. And this is the N162 Goodwin Champs from 1888. Then that set also has the first football card, which is the Beecher card. That's the first football card ever. And the backs, really, it's a set of 50 cards, and the back just has a checklist. And again, it says Goodwin and Company, New York. That's the Beecher card. Some of the other big cards from the set are the Buffalo Bill.
And I got my Buffalo Bill from you, which I really appreciate it because that's still one of my favorites. I knew you were going to show yours, so I didn't bring it. So
yeah,
it's amazing imagery.
I upgraded this. This is the highest graded in the 6, and so I ended up trading Ryan my 4, and that was the first time I actually met Ryan.
National Trade Night too.
Yeah, National Trade Night in Atlantic City. We got together. He saw the Buffalo Bill and he wanted it, and I met with him there. And after that, we've roomed at the National every year after that. This is the Sullivan, John L. Sullivan, 7, next to the highest graded. The John L. Sullivan is the first heavyweight champion of the world. He won like 300 matches fights in a row. Went pretty much undefeated until he finally, at the last, came back from retirement and ended up losing. This is Jack Dempsey, the original Jack Dempsey. He was the first middleweight champion. I mean, look at the artwork on those, and you can see the ring in the background. It's just a string with some post put up there. And the John L. Sullivan literally shows his belt, championship belt.
I never
Right
realized
there.
that detail on that card. Like I have my own copy, but I didn't
Yeah.
realize there was the belt there. Now I see it.
And the belt was created for him. And you know, some of the other cards that are the main cards in this set are Dwight. And Dwight is literally the founding father of tennis. He went out to England, he learned tennis there, and he brought it here, and he set up the first tennis match in the lawn in front of, I think it was his father's or father-in-law's house, and that's where they had the first tennis match ever. So he is literally the founding father, and the highest grade of these is a 5, is a 4.5. Remember, these are really tough to find in any high grade. But some of these guys are people that are, you know, they're legends in the different sports. And of course, you have Isaac Murphy, the first Black athlete. And this one is the highest graded, it's in a 7. And Isaac Murphy was the winningest jockey ever. He literally won, I think, the first year 61 out of 65 races. And even today, they give out every year the Isaac Murphy Award. And the funny thing was that Isaac Murphy, here's the back of the card. It's just a checklist. That Isaac Murphy was the richest guy back in those days. And when you hear the term horse whisperer, that's Isaac Murphy. He started as a slave in a horse farm. And as a teenager, he would ride the horses. And the owner of the farm, which are thoroughbred horses, would ask him, you know, Isaac, which horse should I race today? And Isaac would always end up picking the best horse until finally he says, you know what, Isaac, you're going to be my jockey. And he became a jockey, and he became the winningest jockey ever in the history of horse racing. And today they still award the Isaac Murphy Award to the winningest jockey. And Eddie Arcaro calls him the best jockey in the history of horse racing. And, you know, people say, you know, that, you know, the Black athletes and all that, he is the only one Black athlete that you'll find in cards, Isaac Murphy. And he went on to not only become one of the richest guys, and he dined with all the big guys, Rockefeller and so on, but he also, at the end, ended up having his own horse farm where he became famous with that. Some of the other cards, these are all super famous, you know, I call them sports, but it's kind of chess. Steinitch, again, this is the highest graded in a 7. Really tough, really rare cards to find. Steinitch literally wrote the book on tennis. And if you do any history of tennis, I mean, not tennis, chess, any history of chess, you'll find that Steinitch was the one that literally, not only was he the best chess player around, him and Zukertort. Zukertort was the first one that is also in this set that has the Zukertort entry, which is the knight, using the knight first. Everybody used the pawns, and Zukertort used the Zukertort move. But Steinitch was the champion, and if you know anything about chess, look up Steinitch. All the books and all the experts, he literally wrote the book on how to play chess. Some of the other guys that I'll share from that set are, you know, Ryan talked about the pedestrians. And this was the top pedestrian at the time, Roel. And these guys literally were ultra marathon guys. They walked and ran almost like nonstop for days. And they would have, you know, they literally went around an oval. It was like a few miles oval. And people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people would come to see them. That's how famous they were. And look at the artwork on these cards. I mean, the background, and you can see his medal there on his chest. You know, just incredible artwork, incredible cards. And these are some of the top players or top sporting type people in the world. Here is the top pool player, and that's De Oro. He's actually a Cuban guy. This is, again, the highest graded card of De Oro. And De Oro is still considered one of the top 5 pool players of today. You know, past Willie Mosconi and all these other guys that are out there. And De Oro won tons of matches, and he went on to play pool all the way from the 1880s all the way to the 1930s. And he's still today considered one of the top pool players ever. And the last one I want to show you is Emil Voss, the strongest man in the world. And they still have the strongman competition. It was all from him. And he literally was, with Buffalo Bill Cody had a traveling, before Barnum and Bailey, a traveling circus. And Emil Voss was the strong man. He would lift horses with a pulley, tie them on the pulley and lift the horses. He would carry people from the audience. He would get a barbell and call people out from the audience, say, hang on to the barbells, and he'd walk around the stadium. But look at the muscles and the artwork on the guy. Just incredible how detailed these cards really were back from the 1800s. So that's my Goodwin Champion set. So let's move on to Ryan so he can show us some of the Lone Jack card. And out of those Goodwin Champions, there's less than 100 of those. I'm talking most of them, there's less than 50. And in some cases, less than 20 of those cards are out in the pop reports.
Yeah, so let's talk about Lone Jack. And what I will also say about some of the walkers. So one of the most famous venues for walking or ultra marathons back in the day was Madison Square Garden. Yes, the same one that you know of today. It's been, I believe, rebuilt multiple times. But that was one of the venues where you had a lot of people walking around it. What's the guy's name? Man, I'm blanking right now. The famous black athlete that was an ultra marathoner. He's not in the Goodwin Champ set, but he does have one card from the 1880s. Do you know who I'm talking about? Hold on. I know what his name is. First famous.
Yeah, I can't remember his name.
I'm just looking this up really quick. It's escaping me, and it's kind of bothering me. Frank Hart. Yeah, so that, if I was thinking about like, what was my one wish of a Goodwin Champ set? I think Frank Hart should have been in that set, just based off of his accomplishments on that side of things. Very similar story to like Isaac Murphy, one of the most famous out there. And the sad thing is the ultra sport kind of died out once cyclists took over. So those old venues that used to be running, then the bicycles took over, and then they had the same races, but all the bicycles kind of took those over. And then you had one in the U.S. called Major Taylor, who was really, really famous. Actually, no U.S. cards because of race relations back then. All this stuff is foreign issues, but those were the 1900s, not the 1800s. How about you? What did you get? Did I cut out a little bit?
Yeah, you cut out a little bit there.
Oh, where did I cut out at? I was saying, what was one person that you wish was in that set? I wish Frank Hart was in there. He's in another set, but who do you wish was in the Goodwin Champ set?
I mean, they pretty much had everybody in there except for Hart. And, you know, one of the things interesting back then is that other than baseball, they did have black and white competing in other sports, just not baseball.
Maybe a cricketer or two. That would be kind of interesting. But I know it was a little popular in America. There's some people that played both cricket and also baseball at the same time. Some actually baseball Hall of Famers started playing cricket. So that would be kind of an interesting twist on there. Although a lot of the cricket sets really started in the late 1890s. And yeah, Major Taylor is also in the Felix Podin set, which is a French set. He actually has two different cards in there. There's like a vertical one as well, which is a little bit tougher as a kind of a short print on that side of things. All right. Any other questions about Goodwin or Allen Ginter? If not, I'm going to jump into Lone Jack Inventors. A set that it actually took me about 4 years to build the set, which is very fast because I know two other people that built the set and it took them 20 years. Like this is one of these sets where each card, maybe there's 5 or 6 of them out there, if that. And the fact that there's 3 full sets out there means you have like maybe 3 or 4 possibly out there. And you have to fight over those. You have to make a lot of connections, which is one of the fun parts about non-sports is all the big collectors kind of know each other. And some people have doubles, and you have to find them something they need for their collection to trade into their doubles. You might hate it, you might like it, but it's kind of interesting on there. My opinion, the Lone Jack inventors have the best designs of cards. So check this out. This is my highest graded in my set. Not the biggest name, but this is Eads, a 5.5. And the thing that's interesting about Lone Jack is there's actually a connection into baseball. So I want to say the acronym is N370, and it was a set of baseball champions that was produced. Now I don't have an N370.
Show that again, Ryan.
Yeah, these are N365s. You can see the back on this. So what I was saying is the N370s, they have a sepia tone, right? They're a little bit smaller than this, but they have a connection into baseball because in that set, the N370s, they actually produce a bunch of baseball players, a few Hall of Famers in that set. I think there's one other Hall of Famer in there as well. But they're expensive. I think they're like $10,000 to $20,000 a baseball card. But what's interesting is that same N370 set, it's split in half, right? So half of the set is baseball, half of the set is non-sports. So you can find Ulysses Grant in that set. You can find Mark Twain in that set, as well as other historical figures that are worldwide. I think Queen Victoria is in that set. The Emperor of Germany is in that set. Hawaii, the leader of Hawaii was in that set too. I don't know why I keep cutting out. They're very, very tough to find, but it's interesting. They have a split 50-50. But I'll show you 2 other great Americans over here, or not great Americans, but Lone Jack inventors. This is another one of my higher ones. Cormac. You can see it says Reaper and Mower on here. And Larry, yes, I showed a few I only showed one Poor Boy, but those are really, really cool. I still think they're a bargain. I wish PSA also graded them. Because some people just only collect PSA slabs. And here's another one I just grabbed, Pullman. The best ones in this set by far, and this set is loaded, and I'll load up the checklist here in a second, but Edison and then also Franklin and Bell. If you're going to take a look at the top 3. But let me load up this set over here so I can give you all of the names. Prices are all over the place. So usually commons in that set in low grade are about $200. If you're looking for a nicer Edison or a nicer Franklin usually starts about $3,000. Edison starts about $5,000. It can go up all the way past $10,000 if it's a nice copy. But let me get you that checklist over here. So Lone Jack N365. And here is your set, right? So the big names that you might recognize, right? So Alexander Bell, which I would classify as a top 3. Then Thomas Edison, I think the best one in the set. You have Faraday. You have Franklin, who I'd put Franklin number 2. You have Fulton, Galileo, Charles Goodyear, yes, the tire guy, Gutenberg, the reason why we even collect cards, Morse, Robert Peel, who's partly for postcards and stamps and stuff like that, George Pullman, which I already talked about, James Watt, and also Whitney. And again, there's a lot of other big names. I didn't say every single name, but it's a set of 25. And I just named you like anywhere from 5 to 10 different big names that are household names that most people recognize. Brendan Ryan said, any tips spotting fakes from that set? I haven't seen any fakes of Lone Jack inventors as of yet. It's again, kind of like the Goodwin Champs. These cards are beautiful in person. There's no shot that someone's going to reproduce these. Like you can't reproduce this printing process, the aging on these cards and stuff like that. Like the pictures on here don't do it justice. Additionally, these cards are very thick, and also they have the smell of an 1800s card if you've ever felt one raw. You can't produce that, right? And it's the same, like most people can't reproduce cards from 50s or 70s. There's good fakes out there. No one can produce a Lone Jack inventor fake. It's not going to happen.
They almost look like 3D. when you look at them in person.
They really do. They just stand out.
Show some more of those cards that you got there.
Oh, I don't have my full set on me. I just grabbed 3 of the higher grade ones because I have a lot of ones. I know we have 5 minutes, so what I wanted to do really quick is just talk about the T400s on that side of things. So we kind of talked about that a little bit, and also mentioned there's a lot of other manufacturers out there. So I'm just going to quickly go over some stuff. So like Presidents was a very popular back then because people wanted to know, the U.S. history and things like that. So there's tons of presidential sets. I just grabbed one that was on top of a box. I have tons of different stuff. But for example, Yum Yum Tobacco, right? Here's another one over here, Grover Cleveland. Foreign issues. There's a lot of stuff overseas. So this is actually from Germany. I think this is one of the better designed sets. Stolwerk, which Stolwerk made a ton of cards over there. And this is a Benjamin Franklin. Edison's also in here, but I love the artwork on it. This isn't a particularly rare card, but just the imagery, in my opinion, is striking. I was actually kind of disappointed. This one got a 3. Another US-based set. It's a larger one. This is 1894 Clark's. And you can see this is a Robert E. Lee. Really, really amazing imagery on the side of things. And there's a lot of big names also in these Clark's. They actually reproduced these in the early 1910s as postcards, and both of them can be graded. Since we're running out of time, though, what I wanted to finish talking about is kind of the merger of all these companies, right? We talked about Allen Ginter. We talked about Goodwin Champs. We talked about Lone Jack. But what ended up happening is a lot of these big tobacco companies all merged together to form something called the American Tobacco Company. If that rings a bell, well, it's because it's the same company that produced the T206 cards. Now, unfortunately, since they all merged, there's no reason to advertise in the US. However, one distinction, overseas, they still had to advertise. So while US production ceased existence, they still produced overseas. As I mentioned, for example, in UK and Australia. I like T400s because they're very rare. There's actually even some that have Chinese on them. I just grabbed 3 really quick out of a box just to show you guys. So first over here is the Eiffel Tower. And this is the same as, I want to say, the Sweet Capital views. You can see on this side of things, but you'll have a different back on here, right? American Tobacco Company. And some of these cards also, not the set in particular, but were hand cut. You have to specifically look at the set. Here's another T, right? US flag, same as the Allen Ginter, right? Obviously, they purchased Allen Ginter, so they had the rights of this, and this was a very popular set, especially since it was in a lot of different countries. I want to say this one was Australia, because I have an Australia trade card book, and they mentioned these over there. And here's another one over here. This will be my last card, T416. I think this is also Australia, but I could be wrong. And you can see on this side of things, flags, again, were very popular overseas. People loved on that side of things. But there is so much to explore on here. And if you want a cheaper 1800s card, right, you can go out and get a flag of your state. So a lot of the eastern states, as well as some of the stuff in the Midwest, they produced cards on that. They have the state flags and territories. So you can grab all 50 states, obviously, because this was produced in the 1880s. But a lot of people want to grab their state and have that as kind of their first tobacco card from that era. Or you can grab the holidays, as I mentioned. If you want something cheaper, right? Like, let's say you like dogs, like you have a dog, you can get Allen Ginter cards or Goodwin Champs cards, or not Goodwin Champs, but Goodwin cards of dogs. And there's a lot of scarcity based off of the sets. Like you can think of like any type of subject matter. There's probably a non-sports card for it out there. You just have to search.
Yeah, that's the beauty of the non-sports. I mean, they have fish, they got everything you could possibly imagine. Because remember, back in those days, there was no way for people to even see these different animals or different things because there was just no TV and no other ways of communication. So the tobacco cards themselves were things that people would buy the tobacco just to see the different types of dogs, the different type of fish, different type of birds. There's no other way of seeing them back in those days.
Yep. And one last thing, since I mentioned Ogdens quite a few times, this is like the early 1900s Ogdens. If you thought collecting T206 cards were tough, well, this set has over 5,000 different people, both sports as well as non-sports. And here's the Colonel Coney that I just had on my desk. Cricket, soccer, US figures. It's a beast of a set, and all the variations aren't even documented as of yet. So good luck. I'll say that if you ever jump into the Ogden's set, because even the grading companies have the years wrong. There's stuff that they label 1902, but the image was from 1906. So that's not possible. But story for another day.
There's still a lot of stuff that's being discovered today. A lot of sets that, Ryan's never seen, and he knows a lot about it. So, it's so interesting because it's just so different than just looking at the regular cards you see at all different card shows. You really got to do your homework to even find any of these cards. And it's just, to me, it's just a good search, it's something fun to look for, something that you never ever see.
Nope. The search as well as the connections, and we'll end it off on here because I know this show is closing off. Anyways, thanks again for everyone that has showed up to the live stream. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to either of us. We're both going to also be at the National, and happy to talk non-sports on that side of things.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate you guys watching. Have a great day, and stay tuned for the next show.
Love my hobby. Keep collecting baseball cards.
But hey, we want to keep the lights on here at 4 Collector Studios, so hit the like button for us, guys.
So thanks everybody for coming, and we'll see you next time on 4 Collectors.
All right, guys, have a great rest of your night. Subscribe to the 4 Collectors channel if you haven't done so yet, and we'll see you soon.
All right, guys. Clemente Collector has said we hit a grand slam, so that makes me feel good.